Look at that.
Our baby! He's so beautiful! When love meets courage, miracles are born. In today's emotional story, we follow Linda and Quang on the most intense day of their lives, the moment they welcome their daughter, Sophia, into the world. From the doctor's urgent decision to perform a C-section, to the tense silence inside the operating room, and finally the tears of joy when Sophia lets out her first cry, this is a journey through fear, faith, and unconditional love. Stay with us until the end, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more touching family stories like this one. The morning light filtered softly through the hospital window, but for Quang and Linda, the world outside had already faded into silence. What should have been a joyous day, welcoming their baby, suddenly turned into a storm of anxiety. Linda had been in labor for hours, her strength slowly fading when the doctor entered with a grave look. Her contractions are too weak and the baby's heart rate is unstable, he said calmly, though his eyes betrayed the urgency behind his words. We'll need to perform a cesarean section immediately. For a moment, Quang felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. The sterile white of the room seemed to blur. All he could hear was the steady beep of the monitor and the faint trembling in Linda's breath. His wife, pale and exhausted, looked up at him with frightened eyes. "Quang, is our baby going to be okay?" she whispered, her voice trembling. He swallowed hard, forcing a smile he didn't feel. "Yes, love. Everything will be fine. I promise." But even as he said it, his hands were cold and clammy. When the nurse asked him to change into the sterile gown and mask, Quang hesitated for just a second, not out of fear of the operating room, but out of fear that he might not be strong enough to see Linda in pain. Then he felt a gentle hand on his shoulder, his mother's. Her eyes were teary, yet filled with courage. She said, "Go with her. She needs you more than ever." Moments later, dressed in the light blue surgical gown, Quang stepped into the operating theater. The smell of antiseptic hung heavy in the air. Machines beeped steadily, and a team of doctors and nurses moved with precision around Linda's bed. She looked so small against the sterile backdrop, her hair damp with sweat, her breathing shallow but steady. When their eyes met, Quang took her trembling hand and pressed it to his lips. "I'm here," he whispered, his voice breaking. "No matter what happens, I'm right here." Linda's lips curved into a faint, brave smile. "Promise me you'll hold her first," she said, her voice barely audible under the hum of machines. Quang nodded, unable to speak. The surgeon gave him a reassuring glance. "We'll take good care of her. Stay strong for your wife and baby." As the anesthesia began to take effect, Linda's eyelids fluttered, and she murmured something Quang barely caught. Perhaps a prayer, perhaps Sophia's name. He squeezed her hand one last time before the surgical drape went up. His mother stood quietly behind him, fingers intertwined, whispering prayers under her breath. The world seemed to narrow down to the rhythm of Linda's heartbeat on the monitor and the faint echo of hope that refused to die inside Quang's chest. Every second stretched into eternity. But deep inside, beneath the fear, a quiet strength began to rise. The strength born from love, from faith, and from the unspoken promise that no matter how hard this day might be, they would walk out of it together, as a family. The bright surgical lights burned overhead, their cold glow reflecting off polished steel. Every sound in the room was amplified. The rustle of gloves, the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor, the muffled hum of the air vents. Quang stood beside Linda, his fingers locked around hers as if his grip alone could anchor her to strength. Her skin was clammy, her face drained of color, yet her eyelashes fluttered as if she was fighting to stay aware, to feel his presence through the haze of anesthesia. "You're doing great, love," Quang whispered, leaning close so his voice could reach her heart even if her mind was drifting. Across the sterile table, the surgical team moved in synchronized precision. The lead surgeon, calm but focused, gave quiet instructions that the nurses followed instantly. The tension in the air was thick enough to taste. Every movement carried the weight of two fragile lives intertwined. Quang's mother stood a few steps behind, her hands clasped together tightly in prayer. Her lips moved soundlessly, her eyes glistening as they flickered between her son and daughter-in-law. Then came the moment when time seemed to stop. The doctor made the incision, and Quang's breath caught. He didn't see the details, he couldn't, but he felt everything. The strain in the doctor's voice, the steady urgency in the nurse's movements. The way the monitor's beeping grew irregular for a few terrifying seconds. His chest tightened painfully. "Please let them both be safe," he begged silently, his heart pounding louder than any sound in the room. "Blood pressure stable," one of the nurses called out. A ripple of relief washed through the room, but the tension quickly returned. The baby wasn't out yet. Quang looked down at Linda. Her lips were slightly parted, her brow furrowed even in half-consciousness. He brushed a strand of damp hair from her forehead and whispered, "Sophia's waiting, my love, just a little longer." Minutes dragged like hours. The surgeon's voice broke through the anxious stillness. "Almost there, one more push." Though she could barely move, her body trembled as if responding to the call. The monitor beeped steadily again, and suddenly, Quang heard it, a small, muffled sound that wasn't the hum of machines, but something fragile, real, alive. "Baby's head visible," the nurse announced. Everyone froze in a heartbeat of anticipation. The doctor's gloved hands moved gently, expertly, and then, like a miracle, the sound filled the room. A sharp, tiny cry sliced through the tension, high and pure as sunlight breaking through storm clouds. For a second, no one breathed. Then the operating room erupted in relief and joy. The nurse lifted a tiny, wrinkled bundle and announced, "It's a girl!" Quang's knees almost gave out as tears welled uncontrollably. Her mother gasped and covered her mouth, sobbing quietly. The doctor smiled behind his mask and said, "Congratulations, she's strong." Quang turned to Linda, whose eyes fluttered open at the sound of her daughter's first cry. A single tear slid down her cheek, and she whispered hoarsely, "Sophia." Quang squeezed her hand, his voice breaking as he murmured, "She's here, love. Our little Sophia's here." And in that frozen moment, between exhaustion and ecstasy, between fear and faith, the world felt new again. The cry of their newborn daughter echoed through the sterile room, pure and fragile, yet powerful enough to shatter every fear that had filled their hearts. Quang stood motionless for a heartbeat, unable to believe the sound was real. It was as if the world had paused, machines, voices, and even his own breath, all waiting for that one cry. When it came again, louder this time, he exhaled in a rush, his knees weak with relief. "She's here! She's really here!" A nurse carefully lifted the tiny baby, her skin still flushed from birth, her hands clenched into perfect little fists. The air seemed to hum with life. Quang's mother let out a sob of joy, her hands trembling as she clasped them to her chest. "Thank you, God," she whispered, her voice cracking. The surgeon smiled behind his mask, the tension in his shoulders finally easing. "A healthy baby girl," he said, glancing toward the exhausted mother. "She's beautiful." Linda's eyelids fluttered weakly as the nurse approached the newborn. The room faded around her. No more bright lights, no more cold walls, just the soft, rhythmic sound of her baby's cry growing closer. "Would you like to hold her?" the nurse asked gently. Tears welled in Linda's eyes before she could even nod. Her hands trembled as they placed the small, warm bundle onto her chest. And then, for the first time, mother met daughter. Sophia's tiny cheek pressed against Linda's skin, and an overwhelming warmth spread through her body. The baby's cry softened, replaced by the faint rhythm of breathing. Gentle, steady, alive. Linda's tears flowed freely, unstoppable. "Hi, my little Sophia," she whispered, her voice breaking on every word. "You made it, sweetheart. You're safe now." Quang stood beside them, unable to hold back his own tears. He bent down and kissed Linda's forehead, his lips trembling against her damp skin. "You did it, love. You're incredible," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. His mother leaned closer, brushing her fingers across the baby's soft head, whispering blessings through her tears. The medical team moved quietly around them, tidying instruments, adjusting monitors, but in that sacred moment, all the noise faded into the background. The only thing that mattered was the tiny miracle in Linda's arms, their daughter, the living proof of love, courage, and faith. Sophia opened her eyes for a brief second, as if sensing the warmth surrounding her. Quang chuckled softly through his tears. "Look, she's got your eyes," he said to Linda, who smiled faintly despite her exhaustion. "And your stubbornness," she teased weakly, her voice trembling with affection. In that quiet cocoon of light and love, time seemed to stand still. The journey of fear and pain had ended in this single perfect instant, their family complete. Outside the window was dawn breaking, the first rays of morning sunlight spilling into the world. And as Linda cradled Sophia against her heart, she knew with absolute certainty that every sleepless night, every tear, every prayer had led to this miracle. Her body was weak, but her soul, her soul was shining. For the first time, she whispered not to the doctors or the world, but to her child, soft and full of promise. "Welcome home, my little angel."
Hello, xin chào tất cả các khán giả đã đến với kênh Tự nhiên Review. Vậy là câu chuyện của chúng ta ngày hôm nay đã kết thúc tại đây. Trong câu chuyện của chúng ta hôm nay đã kể về quá trình Linda sinh con trong phòng mổ và bé Sophia đã ra đời trong niềm hạnh phúc hân hoan của cả Quang và Linda. Mọi tình tiết về hấp dẫn về câu chuyện tình yêu của Quang và Linda cũng như của bé Sophia sẽ được kể ở các câu chuyện tiếp theo. Các bạn hãy nhấn vào nút subscribe để nhận được thông báo mới nhất về các tập phim sẽ được phát sóng hàng ngày trên kênh Ý tưởng Linda Review nhé. Đặc biệt đừng quên bấm nút like, share và để lại comment ở dưới video nhé. Cảm ơn các bạn rất nhiều. Xin chào và hẹn gặp lại vào tập tiếp theo. Bye bye.